We welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. My name is Claudia Barber. I am your host for this fine day. And I am excited to present this program to discuss another important topic with the League of Women Voters. And my guest is Nisi Chambers. Hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I know that this is election season, and I know that for Marylanders, this really is weeks away from the general election. And we have ballot questions that need to be sorted out. And not only do we have state ballot questions, we also have county ballot questions. So this is really an important work of the League of Women Voters. Tell us about yourself, Nisi Chambers, and your work with the League of Women Voters of Anne Arundel County.
Well, I'm the treasurer, and I serve on the voter service team. I help to edit the voter's guide, which is our kind of premier product for the election. This is something we've done since our founding, I think, in 1920, where we ask the candidates questions on topics of policy issues of major importance. And we also take time to explain the ballot questions in a way that tries to make them a little more intelligible to the everyday person. Sometimes the language that appears on the ballot is a little confusing and you don't know what you're voting for or against. So we try and put it in plain English. We do some research behind the scenes of the discussions that went on in bringing that ballot question forward. And then we put it in our voter's guide. And the voter's guide is both a print document and an online interface that people can access.
Well, that you said a mouthful right there.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you just said a lot about your publication. You print a publication. So, my next question was, how do you educate voters?
Right. Well, this is really our mission. The League of Women Voters is about empowering voters, and the best way to empower a voter is to inform them. So we do that each election season in a variety of ways. One is this voter's guide that I just mentioned, which is also available to anybody online at a nationwide website called vote411.org. And that's one where the voter can put in their address and it will bring up their ballot, the candidates that they're going to see when they go to the polling booth, with any candidates that responded with answers to our questions. And it will also show them the ballot questions that'll be on their ballot. Second thing that we always do is voter registration. And at our registration events, we have this information available so that often in Maryland, with the ability to register to vote at the DMV, people are already registered, but they may have questions that they can't readily find people to answer. And so we try and be at community events whenever possible to answer those questions. We sponsor candidate forums, either ourselves or as co-sponsors with other organizations. And lastly, we respond to invitations like this that allow us to speak directly with voters on and to emphasize the importance of voting and of knowing, getting the information you need to make an informed vote.
Now, Maryland's is one of those states. We have early voting.
Mm-hmm.
So when is the early voting? When does it start timing period? And when does it end? And when is the general election?
Early voting starts October 27th and runs through November 3rd. It's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Every day. And a voter can vote at any early voting center. They don't have to go to their own polling precinct. The actual general election is on November 8th, and you will need to go to your own polling place, which will appear on the sample ballot that you receive from the Board of Elections.
All right, so that period of early voting, you can vote in any center you want,
Within
and you're not, registered, you're not limited to or restricted to a specific polling place.
That's correct. That's correct. And of
All right,
course, many people are voting by mail, which is
many are.
already started.
Yes, yes. So that's a new experience a little bit because it used to just be the absentee ballot where
Mhm.
people felt, well, I'm going to be out of town and, I got to make that explanation in order to cast a ballot. But since the pandemic, some things have changed
Yes, they have. Yep. And just hopefully just giving people more options all the time to make sure
all the time.
that they
So
have the opportunity.
So Maryland does not have those laws where if you pass out a bottle of water to somebody in the line, you're,
So,
you you you
unfortunately,
might be arrested. None of that.
no, that's correct.
Okay, so let's get into the ballot questions. Court of Appeals and Special Appeals renaming. We will see that if you are a Maryland voter. You're going
Mhm.
to see that on the ballot. What is that about?
What that's about is the Court of Appeals is in the Maryland Constitution. It was the original high court as named in the Maryland Constitution. And subsequently, it was allowed that the legislature could create a second court, in which it did in the 60s to alleviate some of the case log of the Court of Appeals, which is the high court. And the second court that was created is called the Court of Special Appeals. And I think the gist of this is people are accustomed to thinking of a Supreme Court as the high court. And so having this Court of Special Appeals causes some confusion that people don't know whether the special is actually the high. So this will just make it common language that people understand that the Supreme Court of Maryland, which currently is called the Court of Appeals, and the judges in that court will be called justices, as they are in many other states, and certainly at the federal level.
All right, question 2 on the ballot has to do with, is that the civil jury trial one?
No, it's about place of abode.
Place of abode. Okay,
Mhm.
yes, I skipped one. Go ahead.
That's all right. So this is for our Maryland General Assembly, the senators and the delegates, excuse me, that currently, in order to run to represent a district, they have to have a residence in that district, but they don't have to live there all the time or even most of the time. And so this will set up a standard that says that it has to be their primary residence and they have to be there most of the time, which the obvious advantage is if you are resident in a district, you're more familiar with the issues that are around you. You might have more interaction with your constituents. Whereas if you just have a flat there that you visit periodically, you might have a more distant relationship. So that's the pro of it. And the only con really that we found in our investigation was just that it may be hard to establish whether somebody's spending most of their time somewhere, and that could potentially lead to some lawsuits or controversy. But certainly in terms of where you file your taxes, that has to be where you spend most of your time, and hopefully the representative would be honorable about doing what they're meant to. But that's what this does. It just changes it focuses in the guidelines on residency a little tighter on those.
So it will be captioned on your ballot as eligibility to serve as senators and delegates, place of abode.
Correct.
That's what you will see on your ballot. And if you again obtain the League of Women Voters guide, it would give you an opportunity to see the for and against arguments for each ballot question. That's what I love about the League of Women Voters. You are about education. Love it. All right, question 3, Maryland ballot. This is, again, for all Marylanders. This is not jurisdiction specific or county specific, but it is Maryland ballot civil jury trials.
Right. So in Maryland, when you have, if you have a case that it goes before the jury, those are all tried in circuit court. You can have a civil case that isn't tried in district court, but that will be in front of a single judge. And I guess currently, if you would like your case to be heard before a jury, you have to be seeking damages of at least $15,000. What this constitutional amendment does is it says that in order to have the benefit of a full jury trial, the damages that you're seeking in that case, that civil case, have to be $25,000 or more. The pro for this is that jury cases are clearly more time consuming and more expensive. And so setting that threshold higher, it relieves some expense for the courts, the taxpayers, the plaintiffs, and the defendants potentially. The argument against it is that in district court there's less discovery. So especially for the defendant, there may be less opportunity to clear their name or whatever that would happen in a jury trial. The right to a jury trial is certainly something that we consider a basic in our judicial system. So the cases are resolved more quickly in district court, though. And the threshold was last raised in 2010. So we've had this threshold of $15,000 for 12 years now.
Well, but what you're describing, though, is technically the way someone can be cut off from the opportunity to plead or pray for a jury trial, because the praying for a jury trial would be at a higher level, so that if you have a claim that's valued at $15,000, you cannot get a jury trial. It would you have to meet a higher threshold to get into circuit court to pray for a jury trial.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that's really significant
Mm-hmm.
in terms of a change.
Mm-hmm.
So it's access to justice, which might be viewed as an issue when it comes to that important aspect
Mm-hmm.
of having full access to the court system.
That's true.
So what other ballot questions do we have in terms of the state legislature?
Well, there's one more big one, and that's the
One more
cannabis,
big one.
cannabis legalization. And the reason that this is on the ballot as a constitutional amendment is that the Maryland our representatives in the Maryland General Assembly felt that this was an issue that voters should weigh in on, that this was not something they wanted to decide for the population of Maryland. They have enacted a broad range of legislation, substantive reform legislation related to cannabis, but none of it will take effect unless the voters say yes to this question number 4. And it's definitely not it's not an easy judgment call for anyone, and it's going to be a very personal decision, I think, for each voter. The pros are that our adjoining states, Virginia and the District of Columbia, have both legalized it. Maryland has legalized medical marijuana. We have a history documented that there has been a disproportionate number of arrests of Black Marylanders versus people of other colors, and the continuation of this prohibition of marijuana is a burden on law enforcement, on our courts, on a correctional system. And I think the biggest pro is that because we do know that we have this history, that this passage of this would expunge the record of people who have been found guilty of possession in the past, which allows them to move forward with their lives. And the con is there's some there may be some confusion because the amount of medical marijuana you're allowed to have is different than that this statute or this allows. Also, there are serious concerns about the impact that marijuana has on people, and this does nothing to to change that. But again, it is a very personal, I think, question, and I credit the legislature for giving voters the opportunity to make that judgment.
Well, one point that makes it, I guess, controversial is that many say that legalizing marijuana, that type of controlled dangerous substance, is kind of a gateway drug to other more serious drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And there, quite frankly, are a lot of folks that feel that they don't want to be around people that smoke reefer, the smell, all that. So all that, I guess, can be taken into consideration when you go to the voting polls to vote yes or no.
Right. But again, if this is passed, I think that it gives the legislature latitude to enact other laws that may, be able to address some of those concerns about, I can only imagine restricting where you can smoke. You can't smoke within a certain number of feet of a school, or things like that. But they'll have more latitude, I think, potentially.
Well, now let's get quickly into Anne Arundel County, and start there with their separate ballot questions, because this is unique. Oh, no, wait a minute. There was another ballot question, Maryland ballot questions, before we get to Anne Arundel County.
Yep,
There was
there is
another
one more.
ballot, about Howard County Orphans Court judges.
Exactly, which people may be confused about why they have to vote on that. But the Maryland Constitution, when it was originally adopted, established orphans courts, which are really probate courts for all the counties. And so in order for an individual county to do anything else, the entire state has to vote on it. The difference about this is that if all of the state were to vote in favor of this and Howard County voters were not, it would not go through. It needs to vote. But yes, so the orphans court is a legacy kind of thing, and it's unusual in that it doesn't require, at least in Howard County and many of the counties, it doesn't require people who are actually lawyers to serve on it, who have legal training to serve on it. And it does cases of probate, estate type is what it considers. And the Maryland Bar Association has recommended the abolition of the orphans court across the state. I think they feel that it's no longer a necessary part of our judicial process, that those feature functions can be handled by our other courts, which is what this legislation does. It moves any cases that would be considered by the orphans court to the circuit court.
Okay. Yeah. And so that may be coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm. And there may be future constitutional amendments based on this recommendation of the Merit Association to actually do it across the board. But 2 other counties have already taken this step. Harford and Montgomery County have abolished courts previously.
Well, it's very possible we may see that again.
Yes.
But it is there for us in plain view to choose up or down, a vote for or against it. Now let's get to the Anne Arundel County ballot questions. To amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to require the Anne Arundel County Veterans Affairs Commission. Tell us about that.
Sure. This is the only one of the 8 questions that did not go through the review by the Charter Revision Commission, which we can talk about a little later. This one came forward from Councilmember Pruski, and his reasoning for bringing it forward was the Veterans Affairs Commission was established by legislation, and it is an operating, fully functional commission within our county. The benefit of putting it in the charter is that basically the charter is our constitution, and it is our governance framework, as well as kind of a statement of who we are, what we stand for as a county. Currently, there are 4 standing commissions mentioned in the charter. There's the County Board of Appeals, Pension Oversight, Spending Affordability, and some may remember that in 2020, we had a charter amendment on the ballot to add the Human Relations Commission to the county charter. So this would be now the 5th that was enshrined in the charter, which gives it more permanence in terms of the only way to get rid of it then is to have the voters again decide that they no longer want a Veterans Affairs Commission. It can't be done simply by legislation of the council.
Ballot question 2 in Anne Arundel County, to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to provide that no person elected or appointed to the office of county council member may serve more than 3 full consecutive 4-year terms.
That's correct. So this was a 2-year limit was put in 1992, and the Charter Revision Commission, which is appointed every 10 years following the U.S. Census, was asked to look at whether or not to extend the term limits. And they looked across all of the other charter counties in Maryland and said that actually a 3-limit term was very comparable, that some had more, some had none. The only one that had a 2-term limit, I believe, was Prince George's County, comparable to ours. So, when you think about term limits, you think about, the knowledge that somebody gains in serving, and then have the ability to carry that forward, versus somebody getting kind of stuck in their ways. And I think that's again a personal evaluation. But the Charter Revision Commission had no issue based on just being comparable with our other counties, that this was an issue. The one thing that they pointed out, which we wanted to make sure voters were aware of, not that it's a pro or con, but just that they know, is that if once a person serves in our county government for more than 10 years, they are eligible for pension benefits. So there would be potentially for a person that served 3 full terms, the last 2 years of their term, they would be eligible for pension benefits, which would have a financial impact on the county.
Another important charter amendment to vote on, to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to require that the compensation paid to each member of the county council be paid after consideration of recommendation of the Salary Standard Commission that are approved by ordinance of the county council. New provision.
It is and it isn't. Actually, it has been done this way for some time, because when the charter was adopted in 1964, the actual salary amount was written into the charter, which was $2,100 a year. And subsequently, the state legislature passed legislation allowing the county to have this Salary Standard Commission make the recommendation, and then have the county council adopt what the correct or the appropriate level of compensation would be given inflation and the passage of time. So this is just actually putting in the charter what is currently being done and taking out the old number.
Another provision to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to remove the requirement that copies of bills and notices of public hearings be posted on a bulletin board, and to require that electronic copies of bills and notice of any public hearing be published to the county council website and that printed copies of bills be made available to the public and press, and that bills receive required publication.
This is just a modernizing, rather than have something posted in a physical location. And if you put it online, it's available 24/7, and to anybody.
Good point.
And it's less cost as well. So we just, and as long as someone wants it in paper, it's available. Hopefully you don't disenfranchise anyone from being able to find that information.
Understood. So yeah, because everyone doesn't necessarily have the internet.
That's right.
All right, another provision to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to clarify the differences between the two types of emergency ordinances allowed under the charter and the legislative procedure that applies to each.
This, I think, came out of COVID, that some emergency things had to be done, and there was conflicting language. And the conflict comes about because council can call an emergency session.
Okay.
And ordinance can come out of that, or they can be in regular session, process of doing legislation, and decide that an ordinance is an emergency, that it needs to come out right away. So it's just the way that they get to that ordinance. In both cases, the ordinance becomes law, takes effect as soon as it becomes law. In normal cases, it takes 45 days after to become effect. So this just clarifies that. It's just to make sure that either way, the emergency ordinance takes effect the same way.
Very good. Another one, to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to allow the county council to assign additional functions, duties, and personnel to the county auditor that are related to the finances and financial affairs of the county. How does that fit in?
The charter currently is just a little vague. It says that that council can give these additional duties, but it just says consistent with the office. And the auditor felt that they shouldn't be assigned anything that wasn't to do with what their expertise is, which is finances. They just wanted that clarification.
Another provision, to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to change the name of the Charter Revision Commission to the Redistricting and Charter Revision Commission, and to amend the date by which a decennial redistricting and Charter Revision Commission must be appointed by the county council.
The Charter Revision Commission is as I mentioned before, is appointed every 10 years right after the census. And they have two major duties. One is to look at the census data and make sure that the council districts are of the right, of similar size in terms of population. And then they also are to review the charter for outdated things, for efficiency. They take input from all of the county departments, government departments, and also from citizens on things in the charter. And so they wanted the fact that half of their job has to do with redistricting, that should be in their name, just to make it clearer to people what their role is. And the second was that the charter had them appointed subsequent to the release of the census. And in the last census, you may remember, the results were delayed. And so they weren't appointed until October, where the previous commission was appointed in April. And because of the redistricting function that they had to have done prior to, the candidacy, people being able to declare their candidacy, they needed to know what district they were going to be running from. So right. They were really under the gun between October and January to look at the redistricting and get that done. And so they've asked that they be appointed in the year of the census when the county council starts, and not wait until the census results, just in case it ever happens again.
And we have this last question, about 40 seconds, to amend the Anne Arundel County Charter to be gender neutral, consistent with changes recommended based on a review by the county attorney.
Mm-hmm. The charter was adopted in 1964, and many things about how we talk and how we think have changed since then. And this will just modernize the charter to current social norms of how we like to refer to each other and ourselves.
Wow, you have been so helpful in unwinding all of this for us. Nisi Chambers, thank you so much for being a part of Being Well Informed
Thank you very
and the League of Women Voters. Thank you.